A second option with Styrofoam would involve you using paint or ink, if you have ink at home, in order to get the design to transfer. The difference on this is that you will now have to paint the Styrofoam, so with some acrylic paint, whether it be black or tempera paint, which many of you might have at home, you will start with the paint thinned down enough, and you will simply come on top of the tile, just like we were doing with the linoleum example, just like we were doing if we were using the water-based markers. But this time we're going to go ahead and we're going to paint with tempera, and I'm just using a small brush and I'm going over the surface. Again, the surface is non-porous, is not a porous surface, and so it will not absorb this paint. It will sit on the top of the Styrofoam, and once I have it painted, I can then move it on over and transfer it to the paper as a proof print. How did it turn out? I am going opposite the way that the grooves were made, so I'm not filling in the grooves. And then we will go ahead and, like before in the previous examples, we will go ahead and take a piece of paper and put it on top. The difference on the paint is that you do not have to wet the paper. The paint will stay wet long enough that you will be able to get a transfer on over to the good paper. You will still use the pressure on the back to get the print, and your first print will print in some color so you can get a proof print. And you will pull that off, and you will be able to tell if the design is working the way you wanted it to work. This one is okay. There are some areas that I have carved. Most of it is just an outline design. This would allow me to see if it is what I want, or I could pull a few prints like this before I go back and start carving. And so I'm going to do that so I can show you some of the other options that can occur. Now, while this is wet, I will still have some paint on there from last time that didn't get picked up, so it would be a lighter version. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put a little bit of black back on there. And then I do have a couple other colors of paint. I'm going to come in here, and with another color paint, I'm going to go ahead and paint some on the top as I do my next proof print. I definitely see that there are areas I want to cut out of this, but before I do, I'm going to paint a few more, just plain ones that I can use to build up my layers. Remember, printmaking is going to be about showing the understanding of depth. And so I will go ahead, I will put another paper on top. I will go ahead, use my hand or a spoon if you needed to. You could use a spoon to get you the pressure. So I could use a spoon if I didn't feel like my hand had enough power to try and help lift off some of the ink or the paint. This does not involve the paper being wet, so you do need to work fairly quickly so that it doesn't stick. And I would pull that off, and you could see how I could then begin to develop the layers, the idea of depth, by adding new color. I could probably get one more print off that, but I'm going to go ahead this time and I'm going to now just add a little bit more, some gold on here. And I'm getting myself some backgrounds, so then when I go back and do some additional carving, because some of this isn't out enough yet, I still only outlined, I would be able to have a variation on background that I could then go ahead and print on top. And for the sake of those of you who say I don't think my hand is strong enough, you can go ahead and use the spoon. I prefer my hand so I can tell that I've gotten every spot of the Styrofoam, but you may prefer to use something other. This would be equal to the Baron in the printmaking. And you can see that if you don't re-ink it every time, it will have a variation of intensity, which could be very awesome after you go in and you change the design on your tile. So I've gone back and I've recarved and made it deeper in spots and took out areas that I figured that I wanted to be my texture. As we did our first contact sheet, the first proof sheet, to see what it would look like, I've now gone back, I had made a few prints, and we want to see what we got this time. This time I'm not going to paint with black because I'm going to show you how once you're done you can go back and you can incorporate previous prints with new prints. And so this time I'm going to just go ahead and I'm going to put blue over the entire tile, or the entire piece of styrofoam. The tile was washed between this time and last time, and it does appear that it may be retaining a tiny bit of water. And so the first picture probably won't be a great print, but at this point we just want to see if the carving is better than it was on the last one. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to go ahead and get a new piece of paper, and once again we'll put pressure on the back to figure out if our changes made a difference to our styrofoam. Again, if you feel the need to use something stronger than your hand, something equivalent to a Baron that we would use in printmaking, I would go ahead and get that. That little extra is just to get that paint off before it dries on the tile. And then I would open it up and I could compare to the design to see if it's made any difference from the last time. And it has. Those are some sunflowers down there that you can't totally see, but they're starting to emerge. At this point I could go back. This has some black that was still on the tile, so it begins to create an interesting kind of look, an interesting kind of depth. I could also at this point say maybe I want the entire cloud taken out, and I could do that. I think this one works. I think this one over here I would like to go back and make a little deeper as well. But that's what happens with the styrofoam. As you work through it, you figure out what design you like. All right, I want to show you one other thing. I'm going to put that down, and I want to show you one other thing. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put some gold over the area that is the sunflowers. Now I know there is blue there already, but we're going to come in and put some gold since sunflowers are yellow. We're going to put that onto the tile everywhere. Again, I would like that to have more gold and be brighter. And I'll put a little more down here. And then I might go back and put a little bit more blue up top. Remember, if there's any left, it will be lifted off when we put the pressure. And now I want to just show you how I could go back and put that on top of a print that had already been finished. So this was one of the light faint prints that was at the end that got the remainder of the paint off the tile. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to try and line this up as best I can with the linoleum, or with the styrofoam, sorry about that, with the styrofoam and my drawing. And one last time, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put some pressure on that. We're going to just see what happens when we overlap. Remember, the idea of this is to create the illusion of depth, the perspective that some things are further away and some things are closer. And we can do that by layering. So I'm putting some pressure on the back to pick up that new paint. And you can see that now that was once the pure black is starting to pick up the gold and the blue. And so you could play with that in terms of adding layers to create depth to your print. All right, the final thing is if you have any scrap linoleum, and I don't have scrap linoleum per se, but I found some other styrofoam, I'm sorry, not scrap linoleum, scrap styrofoam. I can come back in here and I can do something similar. I can go right ahead, and I haven't tried this one, but we can go ahead and we can paint some paint on there. This has an interesting texture, and when I come back and can put this into my picture, it and so this time I wouldn't be rubbing on the paper, I would be pushing down on the foam. It might be able to create for you some interesting design, some interesting texture. I can use it perhaps to take some off if it got too heavy. And you can play around with how can I create a print that has some variation and some depth on it. If I say, I'm not sure, I could go back, I could once again put some black back on here and paint on top of this. So there's a lot of this back and forth that you can do with the styrofoam that can allow you to create some interesting prints. And then we'll turn that back over and take the tile off. And it took care of a little bit of that blue that we played with an extra piece of styrofoam.